Hi, folks. I'll make another announcement about it, but you might have just heard the recording note. We are recording this session for folks who either have to leave early or weren't able to make it today. The recording will include any verbal audience contributions. If you do not wish to be recorded, please provide any of your comments through the chat. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Thank you all for joining. Hi, for folks just joining the room. Welcome to the Residential Services Training for STEP, Supporting Transformation to Empower People. Okay, in the interest of time, we'll get rolling and people will catch up as they come in. Hi, everyone. I'm Betsy Bella. I'm the project manager for the Deloitte team. We're the transformation consultants supporting DDS with STEP, supporting transformation to empower people. Some of the ways we're supporting are through research, analysis, stakeholder input. Some of you might have been part of those sessions. This has all been rolling up to help DDS create and implement their strategy for STEP. We're also providing technical assistance and training to providers like you as you get ready to develop, submit, and implement your transition plans. I do want to let everyone know today that we are recording. This will include anything that you say out loud. If you don't wish to have your contributions recorded, please put them in the chat. You'll hear from me, Julia Okino, and Shom today. You'll also see other members of our team supporting in the chat. So we are on Zoom today. Welcome to our session. It includes captions. If you would like those for your accessibility, click the CC button to turn them on. If you'd like to be on video today, you may do so using Start Video. Most of the session, we will have everybody muted. This is just going to cut down on background noise. During Q&A at the end, however, you're welcome to come off mute to share questions and comments. Throughout the session, but you don't have to wait to the end, right? Go ahead and put those questions and comments in the chat. We might be able to address them throughout, or we will definitely get to them at the end. You can adjust the view of your Zoom by selecting View up at the top and also entering or exiting full screen. Great. So if you have attended or watched the recordings, what was one takeaway you had from previous trainings, either from session 1 or from session 2? So again, the chat is that little sort of speech bubble looking thing. If folks have thoughts they'd like to share there. I know that some of you are on those trainings. We do have your names. But some quick highlights are STEP isn't just about giving people opportunities to transition. It's really this opportunity for how your agency can look to transform how you provide supports as you move towards this more individualized, community-focused future. DDS is going to be your partner throughout the process, both for developing and implementing your plans. And please go ahead and use the flexibility of STEP incentives and that partnership with DDS to think outside the box, right? If there's something that you've been trying to sort of push the edges on, but you haven't felt like you had the momentum for, now's the time to try again. We're quiet today in the chat. Hopefully we can change that as we keep rolling forward. Again, we do want to hear from you all today. And if there's a question in your mind, please put it in the chat because it's probably on someone else's as well. So as we turn to our agenda today, so delighted that STEP is a major priority for the department right now. And what says that other than having the commissioner and the deputy commissioner on these trainings? So we'll be hearing from them for some opening remarks, as well as the West Region's Resource Administrator, John Adams, who will take us through this welcome. You'll also hear throughout from Rob Gallant, State Director for Dungarvan. So Dungarvan submitted a plan in the first phase. It's been approved. They are rolling on it. And he's graciously agreed today to join some of their experience with STEP. And then together, we're going to recover the review and approval process, talk about available residential incentives, go through the template itself. We'll save time for questions at the end. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. We really want to see your questions. Feel free to add them in at any time. So I'd now like to pass the call to Commissioner Sheff.
Thank you, Betsy. I want to say good morning to everyone. It's good to see a growing audience. We were about 33 or 34 when Betsy started talking. We're over 45 now. I wanted to share with you that I'm going to go off script, so pardon my apologies to my comms team and to the consultants, but this is getting really exciting. When we started this process, I was not certain. We hadn't bitten off more than we could chew, and I wasn't sure how much provider uptake there would be with everything else going on. But as Betsy alluded to, there are approved plans. The incentives in those plans are totaling in the millions. And we couldn't be more excited about that. And with each of these trainings, people ask more questions, get more ideas. And I think my hope that we would see a snowball effect is already underway. And hopefully after today's training, supporting transformation to empower people will be a part of your service and your approach to how we provide services. One of the things I just want to say, because it dawned on me as Betsy was talking and why I'm off script, Michael Williams, former and current Deputy Commissioner at Department of Children and Families, said this to me one day, and it really made me scratch my head. He said, I think we've been telling people everything we do, it's all wrong. We've been trying to teach people to be independent. And what we really need to do is being able to help people be at the right level of interdependence, that all of us are dependent on others for something somewhere in our lives. And that's really, I think, a lot of this supporting transformation to empower people is to help people lead the least restrictive life they can at the right level of support and services at the right time in their lives. And I couldn't be more excited about the transition plans and all the other activity outside of the transition plans related to ARPA that is underway. So I've already probably gone a minute or two over what I was supposed to, but I'm glad you're here. Encourage your colleagues to partake. The proposals just get better and better, and the interest just grows more and more. And so without further ado, I will pass it off to Deputy Commissioner Elisa Velardo, and I will be with you. And to Betsy's point, please ask questions. So we're trying to get that synergy and that excitement where we just pool a lot of ideas and it grows exponentially. And there you go, Elisa. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I love when you go off script. You set a perfect tone for what we can expect today. I'm Elisa Velardo, and I would like to share an overview of the goals for today's session. Today, we're going to be focused on residential STEP transition plans. And I'll talk a little bit about the objectives for today. After this session, you should understand really from soup to nuts what the process looks like from the very beginning, moving from initial planning through submission of a transformation plan, the review and approval process, and then right into implementation. And our goal is that after today's training, you will really have an understanding of what it will take to pull together a transition plan and hopefully be very comfortable with the process. We've learned a lot from those agencies that submitted the original plans and have, I think, simplified and streamlined the process. And so we'll hear a little bit from Rob as well, but hopefully the process is very clear at the end of this training. We understand that systems change is hard, and the commissioner really did give a great sense of where we were at the very beginning and how exciting this has gotten. We really hope that these trainings can help to support you through the transformation process and really expand upon the ways that we support individuals. So now I'd like to turn it over to John Adams, Regional Resource Administrator from the West Region, to share his opening remarks. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. I appreciate it. Very happy to be here. Very exciting stuff going on. Just want to reiterate the Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner's feelings about how what an incredible opportunity this is. STEP is an incredible opportunity to empower the people we support through strategic investments in the DDS system and DDS provider agencies. People are the center of the STEP. We're working in conjunctions with the agencies and with families and individuals, but it's the individuals that are the center of it. We really want to empower people who receive our supports to live more independently. And as you know, charting the life course is an important tool for planning to work towards individuals' goals. STEP will build on this commitment to high expectations, life experiences, and support options that align with the goals of the individuals and their families, and a holistic focus across different domains of each person's life. STEP expands across all levels, individuals, providers, regional, and departmental, so we can all work together for this common goal. We know that some of you have already been doing transformational work, and some have great ideas but haven't had the chance to carry them out. So this is your chance. The funding can accelerate and expand transformation that is already happening, or can make new transformations more feasible. It's been a pleasure to work with Rob from Dungarvan. We've already received an exciting transformational plan from him, a very aggressive, comprehensive plan. So I want to welcome Rob today in Dungarvan. Really look forward to working with those guys. They got some exciting things planned, and working with other people in the region. Hopefully we'll get some more plans in, not just in the West region, but in the other regions as well. So thank everybody for being here. Exciting stuff, and I'll return it to Betsy.
Thank you, John, Deputy Commissioner and Commissioner Chef. Right. So building on what we heard from Commissioner Chef, right? Nobody is fully independent. We all exist in this ecosystem of support with each other. And this is a great example of that, right? STEP might be coming from DDS, but you, providers in partnership with individuals and families, you're really that driving step behind STEP. STEP doesn't go anywhere without you all and the people you support. Up here, this is a refresher from the info session. Today, we're really going to focus on the aspects of your STEP role that are in the bottom box here, creating transition plans and how you can take that movement forward in partnership with the people you support, their families, and of course, your region. You just heard from John that he and Rob, they've been working together on this thing as it rolls forward some. On the right, there's a couple of resources listed that'll help you as you submit your plans. We're going to move through here quickly, but we'll revisit those later as well. I'd now like to pass off to Julia Oak. We're going to talk about the review and approval process.
Great, thank you, Betsy. So before we dive into some of the details for the residential transition plans, we wanted to first provide an overview of the planning and the regional review process just to set context. So the graphic on this slide is just a visual of the plan development and review process. And today we're going to be focusing on those first two circles, which is the transformation planning and transition plan development for residential transitions. And as you all are digesting what's on the slide, just wanted to highlight a couple things about the process. The first is that as you're developing or thinking through your agency's transition plans, important to note that they are organizational restructuring plans, not an individual support plans. That piece is certainly super important, but it comes later. And these transition plans is just to demonstrate to DDS, how are you thinking of transforming your supports and your agency? Along with that, as we mentioned at the top of this, the regional resource administrators are your a key collaborator in this process. And especially if you're planning a larger or more innovative process such as Dungarvan, we really encourage you to reach out to your regional resource administrator sooner rather than later, just so you're able to talk through any questions and kind of address any adjustments earlier on in the process. The next thing to note is that this is a collaborative iterative process for submitting plans. So once you submit it to your region, it's not a one-time yes or no, only chance to receive incentives. If there are adjustments that are needed to your plan or additional questions, your regional resource administrator will work with you to work through some of those pieces so that everyone is able to come to an agreement in sort of the planned approach. And to that, after a plan is approved, you'll receive a formal approval letter from DDS and will also be assigned a regional liaison, and that person will serve as your main point of contact through implementation and sort of be there with you throughout the process. And part of that liaison role is to help if you run into any barriers or roadblocks in implementation. Maybe there's a miscommunication somewhere along the line with the activities. Your liaison is kind of there to help you mitigate any issues and so that you can continue moving forward. And then the last piece to note for this process is just around timeline. So as we've mentioned, we very excitedly, DDS has received and approved 12 plans, and you can submit plans at any point. The last possible date for plan submission is September of 2024. However, the funds are not unlimited, so we really encourage you to submit your plans sooner rather than later. So while there's a bigger pot of money, because as Commissioner Sheff mentioned, the allocations are in the millions. So it's very exciting, but we really encourage you to submit if you're thinking about it or have already started the planning process. And with that, we're really excited to have Rob from Dungarvan with us today to share some of his experience planning and submitting a transition plan. So Rob, welcome you to the virtual stage here. What are some of the main goals of your residential transition plan?
Well, thanks, Julia. Hi, everybody. One of, the main goals that we had was to really, this allowed us to push forward with some ideas that we've already had. We were already looking at moving some individuals to a more independent setting, and the timing of the plan really coincided with what we were looking to do and allowed us to leapfrog, multiple years into a very short time frame. So.
Great. And with that, do you want to share a little bit sort of this scale of your plan just to give folks a sense? Because I think that's exciting.
Yeah. As people have said a few times on this call, our plan is rather large. We're looking at moving 16 individuals over the next year and a half through the end of 2024. When we started this plan, we had one individual in mind, but as we met with teams and spoke with families and individuals and staff, we expanded that number greatly. And our first person had moved into their own apartment in April, and we are working diligently on moving the second and third people in August and September of this year.
Wow, that's awesome. Very exciting. And given, I know stakeholder engagement is key throughout the process, but I think especially given sort of Dungarvan's approach, could you share a little bit how you all engage stakeholders throughout the planning process at the individual level as well as staff at your agency?
Yeah, we, well before we even put pen to paper for our plan, we had meetings, a ton of meetings. We met with each individual support team and the individuals we support to talk about the plan, to let them know about it. We met as a supervisory group to pinpoint people. We had a lot of conversations with our staff about what this might mean for them, and a lot of conversations with John at DDS and Deloitte and the transition team before we even started to write this document. We wanted to make sure we had input from as many stakeholders as we can in order to formulate a really comprehensive plan.
Awesome. Yeah, the stakeholder engagement piece is certainly something we've heard a lot as a key piece to those that have submitted plans. And then last question for this chunk is, what was important to you as you all started the planning process? I know you've spoken a little bit to the stakeholder engagement piece, but anything else you haven't already spoken to that you'd like to share?
I think one of the bigger pieces was staff training and communication. I wanted to make it very clear to staff who support our individuals now, what will be happening, what this means for them. And also that just because we're making these changes, their jobs may be different, but they will still have jobs. It just may be in a different setting or a different type of support for the individual. That just because we're embarking on this transformation plan doesn't mean that we're laying people off, and it doesn't mean that because the person you support is living in an apartment or a different setting that we will still have something for you to do. And I think by getting the staff on board early, they've been able to really help the individuals prepare for this and get excited about it and want to participate. So.
Great, thank you. All super, super helpful words of wisdom. In the interest of time, we'll keep moving forward because I know everyone probably wants to go through the budget sheet and the templates. So can quickly cover the next pieces if Owen, you can advance to the next slide. All right, so this slide just sort of outlines some of the things that reviewers are looking for as they're evaluating plans. When review teams are evaluating plans, they'll be using review criteria that's included directly in the template. Betsy will show a little bit those in more detail later, but the review criteria is embedded, so that can kind of give you a sense in each section, sort of the key things to hit. But in addition to that, some of the elements listed on this slide are also first and foremost, of course, for any transition plan, thinking through person-centered planning, staffing capabilities. I think especially, given the challenges with staffing right now, that's a key thing to just help make sure your providers are sort of thinking through and accounting for any additional staffing needs and including that in your plan. And then also timelines. I know Rob has already started the process, but sort of making sure that the timelines are realistic and will still help maintain the health and safety of the individuals you support. And last piece on this slide is that in the transition plan instructions, which are also posted on Provider Gateway, you'll see a table that includes submission and review window periods. So review teams use those periods as they get plans and sort of so they can chunk out when they're reviewing plans and working with you. All right. So we talked a lot about the planning process and the sort of higher level review process as well. So we wanted to share a little bit more detail about how DDS is making approval decisions. So in addition to the reviewer criteria and the transition plan templates, some of the elements I spoke to on the previous slide, review teams are also evaluating plans for approval based on the key criteria you'll see here. So first and foremost, in order to be eligible for any of the STEP incentives, your plan must be for transitioning individuals from a congregate to a non-congregate setting. So that's a key thing. If it's congregate to congregate, that isn't eligible. So just key to point that out there. And then the bottom criteria on the bottom outlines some of the focuses for DDS in terms of helping how STEP can help DDS really innovate and transform the system. So in order to be approved, STEP plans must meet at least one of the 4 criteria below. The first being meeting one of the Appendix K objectives. So this includes things such as restructuring programs to support individuals with greater need and ending sub-minimum wage employment. The second is a scale of impact. So a plan where the number of people or settings represents a significant transformation for the specific agency. Thirdly, a new approach. So if you're thinking of doing something that has the potential to scale and hasn't really been done before, that would fit this criteria. And again, definitely coordinate with your region on that piece. And then last but not least, if your plan is creating or expanding your agency's ability to provide individualized supports, that would also meet the criteria. So again, you only have to meet one of the 4 at the bottom, but this is another key piece for approval. And with those review windows, as funding is gets tighter, DDS will be comparing plans submitted within the same review cycle. And again, focusing on the approaches that can truly innovate and transform the system. And DDS also recognizes that plans may change during implementation. Maybe fewer individuals opt to participate than originally anticipated. And DDS is working on a process for reallocating any unused funds for later submitted plans. Move to the next slide, Owen. Try to keep my piece quick so we can get to the fun parts. Awesome. And the last piece here, I know we've all kind of touched on the exciting plan approvals. So we wanted to provide a little bit more detail here in terms of plan approvals to date. The table on this slide just has some of those details. There have been 12 provider plans approved, excitingly 4 from each region. So it's great to have even distribution across. And Commissioner Sheff mentioned the incentives are in the millions, and that is currently at $6.7 million allocated to support these transformations. So I know we're all very excited at the movement here and the number of plans and transitions that have been submitted. In terms of the transition, number of individuals transitions, the submitted plans so far represent 116 individuals transitioning as part of these plans for more individualized supports that can help them build independence. So very excited and encouraged by this progress, and DDS is eager to see more plans and innovation continuing to come in the coming months. And with that, I will transition to Owen to walk us through some of the financial incentives.
Thanks, Julia. And before we get in too specifically into the details, I wanted to have a couple of questions for Rob, specifically about how Dungarvan used their incentives. So Rob, to start, what sort of specific transitions are included in your agency's plan?
You know, most of our transitions are for individuals from a CRS setting into a more independent setting. That could be IHS or CCH, really depending on the preferences of the individual.
Yeah, for sure. And so many of those target settings, almost all of them, are eligible for STEP incentives. So can you talk a bit about how Dungarvan is using those incentives to support those transitions themselves, and then also longer term strategic planning and transformation?
Yes, we took kind of a twofold approach with the incentive money of one, helping people transition, but also ensuring that this is a sustainable program. So we're using a portion of the incentive money to hire additional staff and frontline managers, which will be important as our transitions speed up and we need more help on that aspect. We are using to fund assistive technology for the individuals to help them be as successful as they can in their new setting, as well as some additional staffing hours. And a big concern we kept hearing from our families and stakeholders was moving expenses and security deposits. So we just elected to use some of our incentive funding to cover those expenses for our individuals. We really wanted to try to remove as many barriers as we can to success.
Awesome. Yeah, so as you all can see, there are a variety of ways that providers can use incentives, and there's a lot of flexibility for your organizations once you receive those incentive dollars. So I will jump in and talk through these incentives specifically. The first one that we have for residential transitions is the STEP incentive, which is very straightforward. It's an outcome-based payment for a successful transition from a congregate residential setting to a more integrated support, like any of the ones that Rob mentioned, an individual's own home, a family home, or a CCH in some cases. And the payment is received for each eligible transition that a provider facilitates. So there's 3 individuals moving from a CLA, they get this incentive 3 times for each individual, as long as that individual remains in the new target setting for at least 60 days. And this incentive applies to all transitions that I just mentioned. And there's really no calculation for DDS to do here to determine the incentive, since it's the same flat incentive of $33,500, regardless of the details of the transition, so long as it is eligible. So this value in the budget sheet is automatically added to the projected incentive total. There's nothing you need to enter. Next, I'll talk through the provider transition incentive, which is a little bit more complicated and covers the cost of a program vacancy resulting from a step transition. So this incentive is designed to support providers to maintain the existing program for individuals that may still be in that previous setting, in this case, a CLA. So if someone is transitioning out of the CLA to an IHS or a CCH, that CLA setting may not necessarily be closing. And so the provider still has an obligation to provide services that are appropriate for the individuals that remain. And this incentive helps to maintain that program viability. It also allows for more time to restructure settings if needed, if the provider as part of their plan is looking to support individuals with more complex behavioral or medical needs. And also STEP has many safeguards in place in case individuals are unhappy with their target setting or the place that they have transitioned and would like to move back. So if they elect to do that in the first 60 days, they are entitled to come back to their original setting. And so this incentive allows providers flexibility to keep that support open. The incentive is calculated based on the monthly rate of the previous setting. So in this case, a CLA, and is multiplied by the number of months that the provider requires the incentive. Overall, it can be claimed for up to 6 months or until the provider backfills the program. So once that vacancy is filled, they no longer receive this incentive. To sum it up, if someone is moving from a CLA to an IHS, the agency would receive that person's CLA funding to support the vacancy. And all you need to do in the budget sheet is enter the current annual funding authorizations for the CLA and the number of months that the incentive is needed for. Last incentive we'll talk through today is the residential placement incentive. So this is an additional payment to providers specifically for individuals who transition from congregate living settings to independent living settings. This incentive is intended to cover additional costs that a provider might incur as part of supporting a person-centered transition and ensuring that that individual is comfortable and prepared to be in their new setting. For this incentive, the provider receives the payment based on the weekly rate for the new support. And in this scenario that you see on the slide, DDS takes the weekly rate for IHS and multiplies it by the number of weeks that the provider anticipates the individual will stay in that support. Effectively, this is a double rate for up to 20 weeks. And generally speaking, you should request this incentive for the full 20 weeks unless there's a special case where an individual, as part of their plan, knows that they won't be in this particular target setting for 20 weeks. Maybe it's an intermediary step to another support. So then you would use that shorter window. In this example, focused on the transition to IHS, the incentive applies. We specifically focus on IHS here, but the incentive also applies for CCH and any of the other individualized supports that we've mentioned. In the budget sheet, you provide the number of weeks needed and the rate for the target service, and it'll calculate the incentive for you automatically. In most cases for eligible transitions, providers will be eligible to receive all three of these incentives per individual that transitions. So that would be the STEP incentive, the provider transition incentive, and the new residential placement incentive. So now that there's a bit more clarity around what these incentives are and which transitions they apply to, I want to take a second to talk through some additional opportunities for transformation and how to use these incentives. So as we discussed, when individuals transition through STEP, vacancies are created, and providers have an opportunity to use these vacancies to serve individuals with greater behavioral or medical needs or individuals that are on the DDS wait list. And because these settings may not be tailored to support those individuals, providers may need to restructure or augment these settings in many ways. So to fund these transformations, we have seen providers request or use these funds to hire additional staff or to train existing staff to augment their capabilities. And then also, like Rob mentioned, to implement remote supports and assistive technology to facilitate the transitions and make that as smooth as possible and to build independence. I will note that in order to receive any of these STEP incentives for the transitions, providers must either close the previous congregate setting or fill those vacancies with someone from the DDS emergency waitlist or someone who that DDS has identified as a high priority. So that can be a collaborative effort between the agency and the region. If a provider does simply backfill a vacancy with someone, for example, from their own waiting list that does not fit one of those two criteria, they will not be eligible to receive a STEP incentive. So taking all of this together, STEP is really focused on matching individuals to supports that are the best fit for them and for their interests. And through STEP funding and these incentives, providers have an opportunity to transform the way that they think about service delivery and to reach more people and to grow their agency capabilities. And overall, STEP is about maintaining a continuum of supports and reaching as many individuals as possible with supports that are the best fit for them. And the purpose is not to close congregate settings, but rather to just continue to build out and develop this continuum. And now I'm going to pass it to Betsy to actually walk through some of these templates.
Thanks, Owen. All right, so the transition plan template is split up to help make it easier to use. The idea being different folks might be working on different pieces. If you're just focused on residential transitions, for example, you don't even need to look at template B. But everyone does need to read and use the instructions. They also include the authorized representative form that'll need to be signed. If you're mostly focused on financials, you could focus on the budget sheet while somebody else is focusing on template A, but you need to make sure you stay coordinated. If your transformation has multiple settings, there is another form. It's just a table for adding additional setting information. And actually, Rob's plan had so many settings, they didn't fit in the original form. And so we based form A2 just on what Rob had sent in. So thank you for that, Rob. All right, so if we switch to screen share, so you can see the template itself, here is Form A. Hopefully you all get really familiar with it and it becomes a common site for you. You've got up here the table of contents. And so we'll talk through briefly kind of what each section offers. But first, this is just an example plan for a fake provider. You can find it on the Provider Gateway. Please don't try to read everything today. We won't go through every question, but we can do that in a tea office hour. Join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. The link will be in the chat. You can also find the TA calendar in the Provider Gateway. So the template collects information in section 1 on what the current and future programs are, 2, what's changing during and after transitions, 3 and 4, how individuals are supported throughout, 5, your expected timeline, and 6, how you have and will build your plan based on stakeholder input. There's also this optional narrative 7, as well as a section for providers planning to restructure the original setting, 8. So we'll use the clickable table of contents to jump over provider info and just look at setting details here. So this starts with what you currently do. You'll see that there's review criteria throughout the plan. Regional reviewers, when they review their plan, are actually going to use these specific checkboxes. So I recommend that you read them as you go through and make sure your answers meet the needs. This one's really straightforward. It's just, did you answer it? So as we move to 2, which asks about your new setting and supports, instead of Harvest, let's focus on Dungarvan, a real provider. Rob, in 2B, you selected clustered IHS, remote supports, and assistive technology. Can you tell us some more about what that'll look like?
Yes. I think a lot of our plan is really focusing on technology and allowing people to be in their most independent setting they can. And we're really taking a person-centered approach to that. So what may come for one individual may not be for another individual. We plan on offering enhanced staffing using the incentive monies. We also plan on working very closely with therapy and counseling services for our individuals during this time to make sure they have the support that they need. In each transition we do is is almost like the first time we're doing it. The one we just completed, the person's been in this setting for 6 months and is basically, or 2 months, and has said, I only want staff for 3 hours on the weekends now, and we need to make sure as an agency we're flexible enough to support that. So
That's great. Well, and it's so nice to be able to hear from you based on like transitions that have already happened, right? Because these plans go in place and then how they roll out, it depends on the individuals, right? And what everyone's needs are. Right. So to save scrolling today, my version has a few bookmarks. This is another regional review for section 1. You can see this one digs more into if the plan is realistic and appropriate. The second one looks at section, as we scroll down, it looks at section 1 as a whole and focuses on making sure this plan accounts for necessary and appropriate supports for individuals, the kinds Rob was just talking about. If you joined Monday's session on day and employment, you'll notice a lot of similarities. This is intentional. It should make it easier for you as you complete both forms, and it also promotes consistent regional reviews. So let's move to section 2. Rob, I know you were talking about some of this here with the therapy and pieces, but can you talk us through a little bit more some of your transition supports?
yeah, I can. I jumped ahead a little bit or earlier. I'm sorry.
No
One of the,
worries.
like I mentioned, one of the things we really wanted to make sure was that we removed, as many barriers as we can for our individuals to be successful. So one of the supports we're offering to everybody is enhanced staffing, additional staffing hours in their new setting. We are utilizing some of our incentive money to pay for that. And again, it's tailored to the person. Somebody may say no, somebody may say, yes, I want somebody, for a few hours every day. And we have built that flexibility into our plan. The other thing, again, is we are working very closely with our counselors and psychiatric providers to make sure people's emotional well-being doesn't slip during this time. And we've also are making an enhanced effort to offer more social activities and making sure that there are things to keep the individuals who leave a congregate setting more connected to their peers and their agencies and their wider social circles.
Amazing. Those connections are so important. We kept hearing that over and over in the stakeholder input sessions. So as we've jumped to 3, individuals served, this section is really about providing detail on individualization within transition plan. You all keep hearing Rob talk about, right? Like it depends on the individual, or being person-centered, the individualization. So we're hearing a lot about that from Rob, and that's incredible and it's so important. And reviewers will be looking for that in plans. Rob, we also shared earlier that we had sort of, you had a few people looking forward to participating, and then you talked to more folks, and suddenly it started to balloon. Can you share some more of Dungarvan's experience?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things back in September, when we started working on this process, we decided as an agency that we're going to share this plan with everyone, and everyone from our individuals to our staff, case managers, guardians. We wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this was an option to explore. And through those meetings, and talking with teams and talking with guardians, and the individuals over time, it ballooned from the 1 individual or the 2 individuals to the 16 we have now. Every time I thought we were done with the plan, we would add another individual. And I would say it was about a 3 to 4 month process from the time we started these discussions to the time we actually submitted the final plan, because it kept iterating over time.
Thank you so much. And anyone on the call who's getting nervous and thinking, based on the size of our agency, we can't do that. That's okay too, right? You saw in that slide Julia had up with the approved plans. Not everybody's transitioning 16 folks. The idea is to work towards what makes sense for the individuals you support and for your agency. And so here's a review criteria for section 4. This is transition support for individuals. It asks about your plans to support emotional needs, health and safety. We heard from Rob about some of the emotional side. Can you share a little bit more on the health and safety side?
Yeah, I mean, we are working very closely with our individuals to implement some person-centered technology into these locations, and that could be both, you know, passive and active technology. You know, by passive, I mean sensors or wearables or Alexas to, you know, some of our more complicated individuals may require some video, two-way video, or on-demand staffing, remote support. So again, it's very person-centered and tailored to the individual, but we wanted to make sure these options are available for everyone participating in the plan.
Amazing, because you never know what might work for somebody if they don't get to explore all the options. So cool. So 5, here's the timeline. BDS understands it might shift. Just make sure you're staying in conversation. 6, stakeholder input. Rob, can you share some more about some of those specific kinds of discussions and even the forms that you all were using?
Yeah, so over the course of these discussions, we developed a series of forms to kind of help guide our discussion. Some of them we created, some of them we borrowed from other sources, but together they created a kind of comprehensive list of areas that the teams and the individuals felt they would need more support in, ways we could use assistive technology to kind of help them feel supported, and as well as a way for the individual to really provide input into, you know, where they want to live, what type of house they want to live in, everything from, you know, geographic location to the amenities they want to how much they can afford for rent. You really are trying to, again, I keep going back to person-centered and tailored to the individual, but I mean, that's the thrust of everything we're doing is trying to meet people's desires and their safety and mesh it all together. So.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, no, you need to understand people's strengths, preferences, and needs to deliver, you know, what will work the best for them and help to create that plan together. Right, so here's your narrative summary. It's optional, but it's a great way if you want to explain how the pieces fit together and connect to STEP. And then here, if you are planning to backfill vacancies with individuals with higher behavioral or medical support needs or other DDS priority individuals, please complete section 8 to provide some detail on your plans. Now, of course, if you don't know who the individuals are, which is very likely, you'll have to have some high-level responses. You can also thank Rob and other providers who submitted in phase 1 for section 8, because it used to be an entirely separate form until they recommended that we simplify. And so here's your simpler format based on their feedback. So I'm going to pull up the budget sheet. While I'm doing that, Rob, do you have any tips related to the budget sheet?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest tip I could share is to work on both the narrative in your planning and the budget concurrently. You know, that's the one thing in retrospect I wish we had done. We crafted this narrative and then went and did the budget at the end, and we found out that the incentives were a lot more robust than we were even originally thinking. And that led us to go back and implement some of the things like moving expenses and the security deposit and even the additional staffing back into the plan, which ultimately made for a stronger plan. But I think had we been working on them at the same time, we would have been able to develop it a little more cleanly, I guess.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you so much, Rob. And that's not in the instructions. So wonderful tip for everybody. There are detailed instructions in the budget sheet, which hopefully everybody can see now. You'll see it describes each of the incentives that we covered today and what information you need for it to calculate properly. If your agency is also submitting a day employment plan, please submit the budgets together in one sort of budget workbook. In the residential transition plan sheet, here you'll see all of the things that Owen talked through, right? So you ask for a DDS number. If you're considering multiple individuals in a program and you're not sure which is going to participate, who's going to participate, please enter an estimate in this column and then create averages across your programs for the answers. Once your plan is approved, or as you identify individuals, go ahead and update that with DDS. So to fill this out, you select your current support, you enter the current annual funding that corresponds to it. For each column, if you click on the label, these boxes with tips pop up. The instructions have more detail, but this is some quick reminders. Then you fill out the rest. Now on the target annual funding here, you want it for just that service. It should include all residential, sorry, it should just include residential services. So include all residential authorizations. For example, you might select IHS here, but the authorization could include IHS hours and remote supports the individual receives at home. You'll notice here that actually CLA and CRS are options. This is because some people are including intermediate transitions that are not eligible for transitions in their budgets, just sort of for their own tracking. So you'll fill in the vacancy disposition. And then here, as long as this is an eligible transition, the STEP incentive will pop in. The other ones will calculate based on the the annual fundings you supplied, as well as you need to provide how many months you might need it for. Then you'll get the total incentives as well as the program cost. The program cost is not one of your review criteria, it's just a piece of information. Right, so then we'll move to transition program costs. This is further down because it is for both day and residential. You'll see that it is by setting. So it includes both current and future settings. Hopefully this looks a little bit familiar from other things you might have done for DDS. As we scroll down, you'll see that this provider has split an assistive technology specialist between day and res. As you come down, you'll see there's some assistive technology and remote supports in this plan. Those will be really common. If you're not seeing a category that you need, go ahead and add it other. And you should only include things in here that are for your transitions and your transformation. So if you're doing something like providing some retention bonuses to staff, those wouldn't go in the sheet. Right. So it'll all total up, which also then comes to one-time requests. On one-time requests, if you have a major transformation and you have your costs are higher than your anticipated incentives, here's where you can ask for additional funds. Also, as residential transitions, you are eligible for a room and board supplement to replace room and board that you will not be receiving due to transition or restructuring. In both cases, you should discuss it with your region before requesting. So then all of this will roll up into your summary. In the summary, all you need to answer are the questions at the bottom, put in your number of programs, provide your provider information, and then it'll all calculate up for you and you can see kind of all the numbers together. Okay, so let's bounce back. I know we've got some questions for Q&A. We had a question from Danielle Phillips. We're looking to develop a STEP team and have done up a budget that'll focus on both day and residential transitions. There's not really space on the budget sheet for an explanation. That's true. Is submitting a Word document along with the financial budget acceptable? So what we would encourage is that whatever is happening in your budget should really be explained by your narrative in Form A and Form B. So I understand here you're talking about something that kind of crosses across the two. So that narrative summary section is going to be really important for you all. If you'd like to provide additional explanations about your budget, please put them in the narrative summary. You can also sort of highlight pieces as you're answering the other questions. Great. And then of course, the STEP plan submission isn't sort of this one and done. So if there's confusion in the review, there'll be some back and forth with your region to help and support there. All right. So we are open for other Q&A. We've got Rob and John here to also support any questions you might have. So while you're thinking and getting those in the chat, we just wanted to run through some resources that are available. So on the Provider Gateway, so if you go to the DDS website, click Provider Gateway, and then you click ARPA STEP documents, there's a whole slew of things available for you. There's the transition plan templates, the example templates we went through today. There will be the slides and recordings from today, as well as the other sessions. The STEP guide, it has detail on transitions. including if you're hearing rumors about incentives that we didn't talk about today, it's because they are pending incentives that have not yet been approved. But there is information about them in the step guide. There's a provider FAQ. We hope we get some more questions today that we can add to the FAQ. And then there's just some other information about things like how do you think through more creative or innovative approaches. Great. And if you're looking for resources to share with individuals and families, the public step page is a great resource for that. And there's actually like one-pagers with accompanying videos for every kind of core support that's being emphasized in STEP. They're super cool. Really recommend you check them out. Any other questions coming through? And feel free to also come off mute and ask your question verbally. No, nobody?
I have one. Hi.
Yes,
This is Louise from Pencrest. How are you?
Hello, great. Hi, Louise.
I was wondering maybe if some of the providers might be able to help me understand. It's a big change potentially for family members. And I know they're included in the process and they're integral to the success. And I was wondering if there were some good strategies we had to try to help the families feel supportive about this potential change.
Thanks, Louise. Rob, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think for us, and we do have a few families even now who we need to provide encouragement to. I think it's reminding them that the individuals we support are still going to be supported, and we're still going to be maintaining their health and safety. We're just giving them more independence, and that they're, especially with technology today, there are so many ways to address risks and ensure health and safety in a more independent setting without staff having to be with an individual all the time. And it's really a lot of discussions and a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings. And the resources, I mean, we have handed out the one-page things that Betsy was referencing earlier to some of our families. We've encouraged them to also attend the Tuesday sessions that as they're relevant to what we're looking at, but it's really just a lot of conversations and a lot of reassuring families that things will be okay, and also reminding them that there are those safeguards in place that if it doesn't work, we can go back and we could try something else, and we could look at it again and maybe try, a year or two down the line, that it's not a permanent change, that we can change, change our plan to meet their needs and the individual's needs along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I saw Commissioner Chef, you came off mute. Did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I think what Rob just touched on in terms of what makes this different than other times we've talked about this historically is there is that sort of safety feature, which I'm not really adept at describing, but allows for people to take a chance on something different, knowing there's an opportunity to get back what they had. And the other thing that's different this time is we have the ability to hold providers harmless from holding a bed open. So those two things together, I think it's great if providers would get together and network on their approaches for working with families. On the call today, I saw Steve Morris. He has done some of this work up at Favar, and he has made himself readily available. Mike Menard presented on one of our training calls from LARC. And he's in process and has done a lot of family work. And I'm certain that I'm missing some. So, ARC Eastern Connecticut, there's a number of them, but we can give you, if you're not connected with providers already underway, we would be very happy to try and pull together a networking call or something like that. If it would help for us to facilitate, we can certainly try and figure that out. But I do think that's critical as your approach with families. And I do think There are a number of providers who've learned from their experiences already, and typically you as a group, as providers are more than happy to share and support. So I don't think anybody I called out by name is opposed to a sharing and networking. So that was all I had to add, Betsy.
Thank you. No, that's so important. And actually, again, speaking of connecting with other providers, I know Rob shared it been helpful for him, but as you during these technical assistance office hours, they're open. So often if you join, there's other providers on, and people have found it a great spot to sort of bounce ideas and hear what others are thinking about. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you especially to Rob for helping to lead the way with the Dungarvan plan. And thank you, of course, to Commissioner Sheff, Deputy Commissioner Velardo, and John Adams for your comments and participation today. And Michael is in the chat confirming he's happy to help and support others. Owen did drop open a evaluation poll. We are just interested in your feedback today. If you have additional comments or questions, you can reach us at ddsstepsupport@deloitte.com. I see we have a quick Q&A. People, please, of course, feel free to drop. We know we're at time, but we just have another question that I'll go ahead and answer for folks who can stay on. It says, we did up a trajectory for a STEP team outlining what the barriers to implementation to the capacity of the organization to move forward. Is that allowed to be submitted? Absolutely. So DDS is not looking for 40-page plans. However, if you have supporting documents that you think will be valuable to submit alongside that help to explain what you're doing and what you're thinking, please do go ahead and share those with your region. This really is a collaborative process, and the more they can understand, the easier it is for you all to collaborate together and move forward. Thank you all for your time. Again, check out the resources on the Provider Gateway, connect with other providers in your region or across the state, and please do take advantage of technical assistance from our team. Again, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Hope to see some of you there. And remember, there's a lot of incentives available. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.